cutie. I guess we gotta start somewhere. So I'll start at the beginning. When I was around 22, I met a man that became my husband. I thought life would be the fairy tale, honey, that I would be an exception and that I would be different. But the only thing different was the amount of time it took me to walk away and the person that it was with. I can remember before getting married, I chatted with my mom about it, and she kept saying, "Honey, are you sure? Are you sure?" And I just wholeheartedly, which probably more like 80% heartedly, said, "Yeah, absolutely." But now that I look back and I ask myself, why did I choose to say I do? It was a mix of peer pressure, it was a mix of envy, it was a mix of self deprecation, it was a mix of socialization. And when I say that, I mean every girl is fed the Disney princess story, but no one talks about what happens after. And then when you hear other women talking about the after, you're also socialized to believe that they're just bitter, they're just angry, they just weren't good enough. Until it became me, right? And I can remember the moment that my relationship switched from sweet words and sweet nothings to anger, vitriol, and resentment. Maybe I shouldn't say that I can remember the moment. Looking back, I can see the gradual progression of it. But when I say gradual, in a span of time, it was still quick, or like the span of time wasn't long. So I had been married about a year before kind words, and honestly, maybe not even that long. I can remember telling someone I knew the first week that I said I do that I had made a mistake, but I really wanted to try. So maybe not within a year, maybe within about 3 months, I realized fully the mistake that I had made, that this was not what I thought it was. And it's funny because people say that. Like, I knew that marriage would be hard, but the things that I thought made marriage hard were not what I was dealing with. I quickly went from being called dear and honey and beautiful and all of these sweet words to being called dumb, and dumb progressed to stupid, and stupid progressed to idiot. And I can remember the day that he called me an idiot. It was the day that I snapped, or at least one of the first days that I finally snapped, where I went from thinking or making excuses for this person, where I would say, they're just having a bad day. Maybe I can do better. Maybe, basically excusing the behaviors until I couldn't excuse it. When I was called an idiot, it like did something to me. And I won't lie to you. I will never forget. He said to me, the reason why you are the way that you are is because your mother didn't know how to raise a proper woman. And you would think to yourself, in the year 20, what's that, 2014? Who talks like that? My husband talked like that. And because I had some wounds, it really cut. And it was one of the first moments that I decided I would stand up to myself, to this person who went from being so kind to becoming a bully inside of our home while pretending to be a loving spouse outside of our home. And I remember I pulled a chair out. We were in a tiny little studio apartment, right? Like, you could touch the walls basically. And I pulled the chair out from the table. I stood on the chair so that I would be taller than him and bigger than him. And I screamed at him at the top of my lungs. It was very guttural. It was very animalistic. There was a lot of rage there. And honestly, I wish that I had more of that energy throughout the progression of my marriage. Maybe I would not have stayed so long. Maybe I would not have taken so much damage. At this point, I feel like a video game character with a lot of XP and nowhere to spend it. Unfortunately, that can happen in life, and it happened in my life. So I went from that very kind and sweet person, or someone who I thought was kind and sweet, to the realization that this was a facade, um, and I was dealing with the real version of this person. But it took me a long time to fully accept that what I was experiencing behind closed doors on a consistent basis was the real version of them, because there were so many moments of tenderness and kindness sprinkled in the chaos and the anger and the panic. There was so much panic. I remember constantly feeling uneasy. I'm sorry, honey. It's not an easy story to tell. I have a lot of stories in between that maybe I will share, or that I will share, um, because truthfully, I need to share this. And I feel like I need to share this not just for me, but for other women who've been through it. Because what I've learned in the process of walking away is how many people find it easier not to believe you, not to believe your experiences, than it is to give. I feel men are often given the benefit of the doubt. We are taught as a society to give them the benefit of a doubt. Um, Even problems that they have will often be blamed on women, and it may have nothing to do with the woman. So, as a married woman, I constantly found myself being blamed for the treatment that I was experiencing. I can remember when I used to beg to go on dates. We were newly married, and we went from going on dates once every week or once every other week to never going on dates at all. I remember the last time, or at least during that time, when we went on a date, I finally, after almost a year of begging, convinced him to go on a date. And I got dressed up, and he put on a dingy t shirt and jeans. And I said, "Hey, we're going on a date. Why don't you dress up?" And he became very angry that I asked him that, and just proceeded to just be kind of menacing the rest of the day. And then we headed out the house, and all of a sudden, I was walking too slow. But I wasn't walking too slow. He made it a point to walk half a block ahead of me or more. And then when I would catch up, he would fuss at me. And so I can remember by the time we got to the location, we were planning to go for the date, I was just so dejected and broken down. And because I was young, I genuinely believed that I needed to do more. I needed to be more. I needed to be better. Maybe I just wasn't good enough. And that's why this person was treating me the way that they were treating me. And I can remember sitting at the table, ordering the food, and feeling this great desire to cry, but also confusion as to why this was happening. But now, as a woman closer to 40 than I am to 30, I can look back and say, "Oh, you were dealing with manipulation. This person was most likely a narcissist. You were dealing with a lot of different things that you didn't have the experience to put your finger on. You didn't even have enough experience to realize that the things you were dealing with were abuse." And sadly, I didn't even have the term for what I was experiencing until a few years ago. I was in my 30s before I could say, "This is abuse. What I'm experiencing, what I'm experiencing is abuse." And it's very sad, because I also think a part of why I couldn't pinpoint what was happening was because what I was experiencing, I was seeing a lot of other women around me also experiencing. And everyone treated it like it was normal. Yes, they complained about it, but everyone would say this is just how they are. So, unfortunately, now I can see that I was groomed to believe that what I was experiencing was normal. And sadly, so were a lot of other women that I knew. I'll tell you some more.